poems we are going to be analyzing today are Annabel Lee by Edgar Allan Poe and Because I Could Not Stop for Death by Emily Dickinson. They are related through the heavy motif of death.
It was many and many a year ago, in a kingdom by the sea, that a maiden there lived whom you may know by the name of Annabel Lee, and this maiden she lived with no other thought than to love and be loved by me. I was a child and she was a child in this kingdom by the sea, but we loved with a love that was more than love, I and my Annabel Lee, with a love that the winged seraphs of heaven coveted her and me. And this was the reason that long ago, in this kingdom by the sea, a wind blew out of a cloud, chilling my beautiful Annabel Lee, so that her high-born kinsman came and bore her away from me, to shut her up in a sepulchre in this kingdom by the sea. The angels, not half so happy in heaven, went envying her and me. Yes, that was the reason, as all men know in this kingdom by the sea, that the wind came out of the cloud by night, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee. But our love it was stronger by far than the love of those who are older than we, of many far wiser than we, and neither the angels in heaven above nor the demons down under the sea can ever dissever my soul from the soul of the beautiful Annabel Lee. For the moon never beams without bringing me dreams of the beautiful Annabel Lee, and the stars never rise but I feel the bright eyes of the beautiful Annabel Lee, and so all the night tide I lie down by the side of my darling, my life and my bride, in her sepulchre there by the sea, in her tomb by the surrounding sea. So, the poem is basically about a man who loves his wife and he believes that other people are responsible for her death. He goes on to say that no matter what happened, he will always love her and nothing can stop him from doing that. So for the theme, in the 5th stanza, he states that nothing can compare to their love, not even those older or wiser. He also states that even demons under the sea can't part their souls. This is one of the reasons that I believe that the theme of this poem is death cannot kill love. Also, in the 6th stanza, he says that he can never see her, but he knows that she's there. For example, the stars never rise, but he can feel her bright eyes. This means the world is not as beautiful without her, but he still feels her with him. There is a lot of symbolism throughout Annabel Lee. For example, in line number 8, it says, in this kingdom by the sea, which symbolizes happiness, because it's when Poe is happy. Also, in fairy tales, we hear about kingdoms, or once upon a time, it's like a fairy tale to him. To symbolize how Annabel Lee died, it was a wind blowing out of a cloud chilling her. This is line number 15. This is how she died. The wind chilling her symbolizes her death. In line number 21, we find the angels, who are not so half so happy in heaven, went envying him and her, and that's the reason, as all men know in this kingdom by the sea, that the wind came out of the cloud by night, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee. This means that Poe sees the angels as the bad guys because they stole her, because they're jealous of the relationship he had with her, and they want to have that relationship with someone else too. The symbolism relates back to the death because throughout the poem we saw many acts of symbolism, such as death being represented by the wind chilling Annabel Lee, or bad guys or murderers being represented by the angels. So diction and imagery can really help in a poem by letting us picture and imagine the storyline. In line number 2 of Annabel Lee, we can see that he quoted, in a kingdom by the sea, which lets us think of a fairy tale because it's very romantic imagining a kingdom with the sea next to it. In line number 5, he describes Annabel Lee as a maiden instead of a woman, which makes her seem pure and innocent. In line number 17, he says that her highborn kinsman came and bore her away from me, which makes her seem royal and important because highborn kinsmen are meant for royal people and very, very rich people. Also, in the last stanza of the poem, he says, the moon never beams without bringing me dreams of the beautiful Annabel Lee, which means that she represents the moonlight and he will always feel her presence. And the stars never rise, but he feels the bright eyes of the beautiful Annabel Lee. This means that the stars never come around anymore because she is dead. There's no more brightness in the world, but he will always feel the bright eyes and her presence around him. The last one of the poem is in her tomb by the sounding sea, which gives us this melancholy picture of her tomb, and with him there by the sounding sea. imagery connects back to the theme because it lets us understand the author's love through metaphors and painting pictures. The tone of Annabel Lee is mournful because he criticized the angels for stealing his love for 2 stanzas. For example, in number 22, he said, "The angels went envying her and me. Yes, that was the reason as all men know in this kingdom by the sea, that the wind came out of the cloud by night, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee." This is a very sad tone, and it's very mournful because he's mourning his love of Annabel Lee, and he criticizes the angels for killing her. The mood of Annabel Lee is somber because we see Poe struggling over her death and his love. It's difficult to read as rare about why she died, but bitterly sweet when we see how he loves her unconditionally in the last 2 stanzas. The mood and the tone add to the theme because they provide the reader with the feelings that love cannot be killed. We believe that there's a lot of author background in this poem. Poe led a very depressing life. He was orphaned at a young age, and he faced major debt in college and also found his fiancée married to another man when he came back. He lost many loved ones in his life. He wed his cousin later, who suffered from tuberculosis for most of the marriage, and she died. Many believe that she was his muse for Annabel Lee. He wrote it 2 years later in the house they shared, and it was published 2 days after his death.
Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. The carriage held but just ourselves and immortality. We slowly drove, he knew no haste, and I had put away my labor and my leisure too for his civility. Past the school where the children strove, at recess in the ring, we passed the fields of gazing grain, we passed the setting sun. Or rather he passed us, the dews drew quivering and chill, for only gossamer my gown, my tippet only tulle. We paused before a house that seemed a swelling of the ground. The roof was scarcely visible, the cornice in the ground. Since then, 'tis centuries, and yet feel shorter than the day I first surmised the horses' heads were toward eternity. So the summary of the poem, Because I Could Not Stop for Death, is that death comes amiably to pick up the speaker. The speaker shows no resistance and rides along willingly, viewing the journey of life along the way. She eventually arrives at her tombstone. In the end, she has a flashback to the day she died. For the theme of the poem, we chose death as welcoming. As shown in the first stanza, she describes death as kind. Throughout the first and fourth stanzas, they ride along pleasurably, showing no haste. They then approach the grave in the last 2 stanzas, which seems like a homely house. This all makes death seem welcoming. Four major symbols in this poem. These symbols help emphasize the theme that the author is trying to convey. The symbol of the carriage in the first stanza symbolizes the speaker's ride to death. It not only holds the passenger in death, but also immortality, which means eternal life. Another symbol is the setting sun in stanza 3. They pass through the person's life, ending with the setting sun. The setting sun results in darkness, which symbolizes death. One other symbol is the house in stanza 5, which symbolizes the grave. At first, the person thinks it's a house, but it turns out to be described as underground or a grave. The final symbol is the horse's head in the last stanza, which symbolizes the first moment the person knew she would die. In the poem, she's thinking back to the day of her death when she first surmised a horse's head, or when she first knew what they meant. Emily Dickinson uses imagery and diction, 2 key components of this poem, to show us how death approaches the speaker. The first line of stanza 2 creates a picture in the reader's mind that death takes its time and it is a slow process. The author also describes her journey of life as she talks about the children at school and the gazing fields of grain in stanza 3. This description lets the author realize that the speaker of the poem is lively and accepts death because it is natural. Diction is also very important, as Dickinson uses words like kindly and civility in stanzas 1 and 2. Her use of simple language emphasizes that she accepts death. For the first line of stanza 5, the grave is said to be a house. Therefore, the readers can assume that the grave is not to be feared, since a home is supposed to be a place of peace and happiness. Diction and imagery tie back to the theme, as the authors can visualize and understand from her simple language and description that death is welcoming. Tone and mood also impact the way the readers view the theme of the poem, because I could not stop for death. In stanzas 1 and 2, the speaker says the lines, "He kindly stopped for me, and for his civility." This shows that the tone is light-hearted at first as she accepts death. However, towards the end of the poem, in stanza 4, she uses lines like, "The dews drew quivering and chill, for only gossamer my gown, my tippet only tulle." The mood here is a bit more melancholy, and the tone is dark and gloomy as she is getting closer and closer to her death. She isn't as happy or lively as she was in the beginning of the poem, but she isn't very sad about it either. Tone and mood help the readers understand how the speaker feels about accepting death and thinking of it as a part of life. Emily Dickinson's background definitely impacted her poetry. As a child, she was very playful. However, as she became older, she grew more into seclusion. She would only see her close families and friends and stay locked up in her room most of the time. She spent most of her life writing, producing poem after poem. She died on May 15, 1886 because of a 2-year illness. This poem, "Because I Could Not Stop for Death," was influenced by her own life. Her isolation made her depressed, and therefore she wrote about death. But since she was lonely, she made it welcoming.